Iceland is the most gender equal country on the planet and has been for over a decade, according to surveys by the World Economic Forum. But even there, more work remains to be done to see women and men enjoying a full equality in the workplace. By the third week of November, women in many countries are effectively working for free compared to salaries paid to their male colleagues. While many nations have put in place measures to try and balance the books, in countries like here in France, it could take another 1,000 years to get there. That's according to European Trade Union Confederation. Well, to give us her perspective on it all and tell us a bit more about Iceland's secret in particular, we can speak now to German economists at the Institute for Social Research in Norway, Ms. Ines Wagner. Ms. Wagner, thanks so much for your time. Can you tell us a little bit, firstly, about Iceland? It's held up as the good student. How good is it?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I unfortunately did not hear the question completely. Could you repeat it, please?
I was just asking you, how good is Iceland? It's held up as the good student, but just how good is it?
Well, comparatively, it is obviously much better than in a lot of other contexts when we look at the gender pay gap. It has been leading the World Economic Forum's list of one of the most equal gender pay societies. But obviously, it is not perfect. So what we do see is that a lot of women work in part-time work. It still has a gender pay gap of 18%. So actors in Iceland are also looking for solutions to actually close the gender pay gap. Since the 1960s, it has a quite progressive policy on gender equality, but still to this day, even though it is a leader in gender equality, there is still an existent gender pay gap. We have feminized jobs in the society that are valued less than jobs dominated by men. And we do see that women work more in part-time jobs, taking more time for unpaid care functions in the family or elsewhere.
Okay, so much remains to be done, but it is doing better than, well, most of the rest of the world. Tell us a bit, why is that? What is Iceland's secret? What has it got that others don't?
Well, I think it is partly due to a strong women's movement that has also influenced this recent policy called the Icelandic Equal Pay Standard. And what is interesting here is that different to other countries or other previous policy solutions, it turned the logic on its head. So previous policy solutions that Iceland implemented look that the worker changes his or her behavior. But what Iceland has done is that the employer has to change the behavior. So the organization or the institution itself. And there are basically three areas that it wants to change. And one is the shift in burden of proof. So it's up to the employers to show that they do pay equal wages. There's an enforcement system in place that's outside of the organization, so semi-independent. And there is a system to create transparency for the employer, but also for the employees. And that has been very much fueled by the financial crisis, where Iceland was hit very hard. And there was a public discussion on the male toxicness that actually fueled the financial crisis. So as a direct Yes.
Yeah, fascinating that they've put the onus of proof onto companies to prove that they are providing equal pay for the same job done, be it man or woman. And I believe that companies in Iceland actually approve of this measure, this law.
Well, they do have to approve of it now because it's a law. So it was first intended to be a tool, a voluntary tool, but since 2018 it's mandatory. So on the one hand, there's no choice, but on the other hand, there's also an acceptance. So there was not a rebellion against it. And what we've seen is that employees, but also employers actually saw that it's a helpful tool for them to create a transparent pay system. So it's good for their business as such, but it also shows that it helps with new recruitments. So they can show that they do pay fair wages. It's actually helpful for the companies itself. Sorry, the light goes off.
No worries, we can still see you, Ms. Wagner. Tell me, do you think that this Icelandic model is the one for other countries to follow?
Well, I think I should say two things. First of all, it's not the end-all solution to eradicating the gender pay gap. It's an in-company system, so it doesn't address the gender segregation in the labor market, but it has been designed as a system to implement in other contexts. So it is flexible enough that other countries or even companies in other countries that work on an international basis, but also smaller companies, can certainly implement it. It's based on a management standard. So a lot of companies have experiences with implementing environmental management standards. So it's the first management standard for equal pay. So in principle, it's possible.
Very finally, because elsewhere, the onus is on the employee to prove that they're being discriminated against. But, give us an idea of just how hard that is and how successful people have been in taking their cases to trial.
Oh, it is very hard for employees, and that's why the shift in burden of proof is so vital, I think, here, and so progressive, because there's a lot of red tape. But in the first place, you do have to make the decision to go to trial, which is costly, which is time intensive, which creates conflict with the employer. So there hasn't been a lot of change in uncovering unequal pay. And you don't have necessarily the resources to show this unequal pay. So shifting this perspective is quite vital in giving employees the right to actually ask, to inquire, how do you arrive at this pay scale and how am I judged in relation to others on a personal level, but also just the job that I'm doing independently of my skills and of my background.
Ms. Ines Wagner, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks so much for giving us more insight into what is currently available and indeed how much more work remains to be done. That's it for today's Perspective.